Hi there, it's Chris. In today's video, we are going to deal with one of the common objections to the fine-tuning argument for the existence of God. So let's get into it. So one of the most common arguments against objections to the fine-tuning argument is the proposal of multiverse hypothesis. For those of you who don't know what is a fine-tuning argument, I have written a blog to explain it to the layperson. I'm a layperson too, it's okay. So I've written it so that a layperson can understand what the fine-tuning argument is. So I will not be going into the details of the type of argument that it is and the mechanisms of the argument as such, but we will just go to the particular objection that is usually given, which is the appeal to the multiverse hypothesis to counter that the universe is fine-tuned. So basically the fine-tuning argument is an abductive argument. So what it does is it presents certain features that we observe, which we can empirically analyze and find out, and then we propose multiple options for that which explains this phenomena, and we see which one has the most appropriate explanatory power, which can be most appropriately explaining the features that we find here. So here is the fine-tuning argument, and the theist usually presents three options, which is chance, design, and physical necessity. And based on these analysis of three factors, we just go on to see which one is the most appropriate, which is more empirical, which has more explanatory power, and so on and so forth. So this is an abductive argument, not a deductive argument, which is more stronger. In the case of contingency argument or cosmological argument, those arguments are very strong. The abductive argument is a probabilistic argument, right? Which it states particular features that we find and the conditions that are going to fulfill these features. So it is an abductive argument. So in my recent discussion with Satya Anveshi, Mr. Manohar, he was proposing a number of objections to the fine-tuning argument, which I'm going to be discussing one by one. Of course, not all of it, but maybe most of it I will be discussing now itself. He makes the appeal that we should not believe something that doesn't fulfill the verification criteria or verification principle. That anything that cannot be empirically analyzed and found out, we should not be believing that. In the same breath, he also goes on to propose the multiverse hypothesis, which even physicists themselves, even well-known people in the field of academia itself, accept that the concept of multiverse has zero evidence as far as physics is concerned. Those who are studying physics, they can guarantee you that there is absolutely no evidence for the existence of multiverse. Of course, that doesn't mean that there is no multiverse. We just cannot have any empirical data to analyze the multiverse as such. At least for now, we don't have any such data. So Satya Anveshi proposes a verification principle that anything that is not empirically verified should not be accepted. Then goes on to propose the multiverse, which cannot be empirically verified. And of course, I already dealt with this. There are two things that needs to be kept in mind when anyone proposes the idea of verification principle and the scientism. Scientism is the claim that we cannot know anything beyond what science teaches us. Only science is the way to truth, and science is the only most important epistemic tool that we have. This was debunked way back in the 1960s and 70s itself. People found out that this was self-contradictory. You cannot verify the verification principle, and you cannot scientifically prove the scientific principle. So we understand that this is a self-contradictory position, and none of the philosophers in academia accept that. But it is very common among internet skeptics and atheists. That is the problem here. So that is the one thing which we need to understand. So most of the physicists do not accept the multiverse as a field of study within physics. What it is it is a field of metaphysics. We cannot empirically analyze the multiverse. That doesn't prove that there is no multiverse, right? We cannot prove or disprove the existence of multiverse. But this is given as a pushback to the fine-tuning argument. All through the centuries, theists have been the one who usually give a pushback. They said that the human body is so intricately functioning, so it should be made with a designer. Evolution came along and it proved that it is not necessary to propose a designer to explain the intricate nature of human body or animal kingdom and so on. Evolution was proposed, Darwinism came in, and the theists were pushing back more and more, and finally they ended up saying that the universe was created by God. And in recent times, even that is being questioned. That is the reason why I don't necessarily support the Kalam cosmological argument, because It is possible in the future that we find out that the universe did not have a beginning as quote unquote the normal time framework that we have. We cannot empirically or scientifically say that the universe began to exist. That could be possible because there is a minority of physicists who don't believe that the universe began to exist. So that's the reason why I don't use the Kalam cosmology argument. I rather go for the contingency argument. The multiverse hypothesis makes an appeal to ignorance as such. We don't know, we cannot know if there is a multiverse, but the skeptics appeal to this multiverse as a pushback to the fine-tuning argument, which is quite pathetic actually, because it doesn't actually explain away the fine-tuning argument. What it does is push back the whole question of fine-tuning of the universe to fine-tuning of the multiverse. That's all it is. No, this is not the God of the gaps argument, or it is not an appeal to ignorance. This is a fact. I will explain to you what it is. So before we go into that, we need to assume that there is a multiverse. I'm going to assume that there is a multiverse, right? Since we don't have any disproof of it, so let's assume that there is a multiverse and give the benefit of doubt to the skeptic. There are two fallacies that needs to be analyzed here right now. One is the gambler's fallacy and another is the reverse gambler's fallacy. I'll give you an example. Let's say that I have two dice in my hands and I throw it out, keep throwing it again and again. Let's assume that I am getting 6 in both the dice continuously, like 3 or 4 tries I'm getting 6 again and again. And you come in and I'm going to ask you, before I put the next try, I'm going to ask you, will I get 6 again? You are probably going to answer most probably not. You are already getting 6 till now. For the past 3-4 tries, you have been getting 6, so next time it may not be 6. And this is what the gambler's fallacy is, because the previous tries that I have done doesn't affect what I'm going to get in the next try, right? If I am getting 6 for the consecutive 5 times, it doesn't mean that I should not be getting 6 again in the 6th try. Reverse gambler fallacy is that I have 2 dice and I'm putting the dice again and again, trying again and again. You come in the middle. You are coming in the middle and you observe that in one of the tries I'm getting 6. And when you see that 6, you start immediately assuming that probably you are throwing this for a long number of times. That is why there's a lot of tries that you have done until now, and that is why you are having 6 now. That is a fallacy again. It is called as a reverse gambler's fallacy. So if you observe cleanly, the multiverse hypothesis commits this fallacy of reverse gambler's fallacy. You observe that the universe is fine-tuned, having particular constants, particular values of each of the constants, and you start assuming that there must be a lot of tries before this, multiple infinite number of universes before this, in which these tries were tried out, these constants were tried out and it failed, and finally it has survived and we have the universe in which we are existing right now. This is a reverse gambler's fallacy, textbook definition of reverse gambler's fallacy. So another thing that needs to be kept in mind is, when you are proposing the concept of multiverse hypothesis, you are also bound to explain the complex mechanisms behind the origin of multiverse. So instead of giving a simple answer as the answer to the fine-tuning argument, which is design, the skeptics tries to propose a very complex mechanism in which each of the constants are all fine-tuned and multiple universes are thrown out of some mechanism. There is no origin of this mechanism where it is all fine-tuned, each of the constants are fine-tuned and universes are thrown out one by one. And some skeptics even propose that there are an infinite number of universes produced like this, and we just happen to be in one of those universes where these parameters are fine-tuned. This is really a question-begging fallacy at the end of the day, right? Even in my discussion with Satya Anveshi, he was proposing that chance could be a appropriate answer to this whole fine-tuning argument, and he goes on to not explain why it is chance. He just assumes that it is chance and begs the question. So this is what is the God of the gaps? No, naturalism of the gaps. You appeal to naturalism and presuppose that naturalism is true, and then assume that chance is the only mechanism by which the universe can be fine-tuned. That is what it is basically, making the question fallacy. And no evidence is presented for explaining why chance is the answer, but it is simply appealed based on the presupposition that naturalism is true and God doesn't exist. So that kind of a disingenuous approach is not appropriate in the field of philosophy or rational thinking. No, I don't think so. That's not appropriate. The explanation is usually given somewhat like, Well, we happen to be in this universe which appears to be fine-tuned. So why are we asking this explanation? If it was not fine-tuned, we would not even be existing. So what is the point in asking this question, why it was fine-tuned? Let me just give you an example which explains how stupid this is. Let's say that I am a detective, and me and some of the skeptics are detectives, and we go into the house and we find a dead body there. So there are multiple options why there is a dead body in there. It could be murder, suicide, or homicide, whichever it could be. And I am saying, oh, we have a dead body here. This is a scenario that we have, a dead body inside a closed room. We need to give an explanation for why this is happening. It could be murder, suicide, or homicide. But the skeptic merely replies by saying, well, we have a dead body in this room. That is the reason why we are even asking for a reason. Why should we ask for a reason if there is no dead body? That's what I am asking. If there is no fine-tuning, we don't need to ask the reason why it is fine-tuned. But it is fine-tuned, and you have to give a reason for why there is fine-tuning. Coming to the next point is, theists have always included chance as one of the answers for the fine-tuning. Chance, design, and physical necessity. I think they are very courteous, too courteous to include chance as one of the explanations for the multiverse. Chance as one of the reasons for the fine-tuning of the universe. Because let's say that I have 2 dice as usual. I am throwing it out again and again. Let's say that I get 6 in both the dice continuously for 100 dice. 100 tries I am putting it again and again. I am getting 6 again and again. And you could ask the question, how did this happen? How did this phenomenon where I am getting 6 in both the dice happen for 100 consecutive times? It is unlikely, right? It is a very improbable situation, and it is happening, and I want to ask the question, how is that possible? If you say that it is by chance, you are merely giving an explanation for the mechanism by which it happened, right? If you ask, actually, what is the reason behind having this improbable situation of having 6 consecutively 100 times, it is because I threw it out. That is the basic answer. It is not chance. Chance is a mechanism by which I threw it out and it came out as 6. So chance doesn't really explain the fine-tuning at all. It is not appropriate to include a chance within the criteria of the fine-tuning itself. But it has been very courteous on the part of the theist to include the chance as one of the reasons. So we need to keep that in mind. So if you're going to propose that chance is a reason why the universe is fine-tuned, you need to propose what is the basis for that, rather than presupposing that naturalism is the reason and there is no God, therefore it must have been by chance. You need to prove that it is by chance. When we see design in nature, we observe design in nature, we know that it is not by chance, we know that it is by design. But when the same principle is applied to the universe, the skeptics find this very difficult to actually apply the same principle, that it must be by chance, because they cannot allow the creator or designer in this situation. And let's be very clear, fine-tuning argument doesn't lead necessarily to a God. It is a very, very humble argument actually. It doesn't lead to a God. It merely proposes there is a design behind the universe. So I think that is one of the reasons why I feel the fine-tuning argument is one of the strongest arguments, because it is probabilistic, abductive argument, and doesn't make big claims. It makes very simple claims that there could be a designer behind the universe, which I don't think is a big issue at all. You can definitely accept that there is a designer behind the universe. Whether the designer is a God or not is a second question. We will discuss that later on. So basically we can understand this multiverse, it is not within the field of physics. For those people who are believing in science and verification principle, they should not propose the concept of multiverse at all. And it is accepted by majority of physicists that the universe is fine-tuned. There is no much debate on that. There are some physicists who don't agree, but ultimately we know that many of the constants are very finely tuned in a particular position, particular value, so that life is possible. So that morally conscious being like human beings can exist in this universe. And that is one reason. The multiverse hypothesis merely is a pushback to the fine-tuning argument of the universe. Now the question becomes, what is the reason for fine-tuning of the multiverse? It doesn't change any of the argument, it doesn't invalidate the argument in any sense. And also, appealing to the multiverse as a way to prove chance is committing the fallacy of gamblers and reverse gamblers fallacy, which we already discussed here. And this is an appeal to ignorance at the end of the day. And people who say that it's always by chance is presupposing naturalism. It's a presuppositional argument, and they do not really explain why it is by chance. They are just giving question begging fallacy here. We need to also discuss another objection to the fine-tuning argument, which is that we haven't observed other universes where the constants are modified. Of course, that is the whole basis of metaphysics, that is the whole basis of theoretical physics. We are going to propose imaginative situations and see how it plays out. That is how science works. We are going to have general principles that we know, general laws that we know. We are going to propose hypotheses, and we will apply these laws over these hypotheses and see which one works. And based on this kind of a study, we know that when you alter the cosmological constant or the weak and strong gravitational forces and so on and so forth, when you change these constants, universes cannot come into being. The entire universe itself cannot come into being, and if they come into being, they will be short-lived. They will be extremely hostile to any life forms. Leave alone any chance of possibility of human beings coming out. There is no possibility of even having heavy metals coming up. Only helium, hydrogen, or these simple elements would exist. There will be no possibility of any life forms in such a kind of situation, and no possibility of consciousness either. So that brings us to the end of the video. So we do have to discuss a lot more, and this is an unscripted video, so I could have made some mistakes. So bear with the mistakes. So possibly in the future, maybe put in the comments if there are any mistakes that I made. Maybe I could correct it and maybe rectify it in the next time. Thank you. Bye.